Morning, and welcome to day 2 of the database week. Today we start adding data and modifying data on a database. So inserting and modifying data, on-site check. Right. So we're gonna we're gonna look at how to add and modify data on a database from a couple of angles, right? From the SQL, pure raw SQL angle, and for that, of course, we're gonna go back and use our little tool here. Just in case you missed it, I'm gonna send you that link again. Here we go. Right, so that way we don't have to deal with installing databases or dealing with any of that. We just practice our SQL here, and this is going to be the first part of the lecture. And then for the second part, the fun begins. We're going to take our guided project. Hopefully everybody port and clone this and install all the dependencies, and then we're going to take this existing code, add a database to it, and see how we can perform CRUD operations, but this time we're gonna go all the way down to the database and persist some data. So hopefully you're excited about that. And that means that you'll be able to do CRUD operations now, basics of it, right? From your API. Cool. All right. So thank you for the suggestion, Angela. I have to go and check that out if that's for me. Seeing why Zoom is eating up my CPU. I've had that problem for a long time, so never actually looked into the statistics on the video. Thank you for the tip. Cool, so there is a questions thread pinned to the channel. Please use it, and let's get started. So the first thing we're going to talk about is how to insert data into a relational database. We're going to use an existing one here, and then we're going to see, I'm going to come back and we create our own using SQLite Studio. We're going to do that from JavaScript, and hopefully it's just as easy as doing it with raw SQL. All right, so we have these stable customers, and let's see if we can add a customer in here. Part of your stretch yesterday, including adding data to a database, right? Remember that? Right? So we have 91 records out of the box on this table. Let's see how we can write in some kind of code to add a new customer to this table. You can follow along with me right after I finish writing it. I'm gonna let you write it, right? So the command that we're gonna use, the keyword that we're gonna be using for that is the insert command. And it's simple, it's insert into where? What, right? So the where here is the table, customers. And then if you were the database, you'll be like, can you give me the values for this data? So that's what comes next, the values, right? And if you look at the table that we have right there, you'll see that we have the ID, the customer name, and if you pass the values in the exact same order that they come out of the database, you can pass the values for that in that exact same order and it will work. Here's the thing though. You rarely ever do these inserts this way because one of those fields, one of those columns, the customer ID, is auto-generated by the database. Remember that we created that primary key and we normally make that auto increment? This database is set up that way. So normally what happens is that if you are working with a table that has some values are incremented that way, you don't want to pass values for that. So in that case, what you do is that you pass a list of the fields or the columns in the order that you want to update them, that you want to add value to them. So in this case, I want to say into the customers, customer name, contact name, let's say address, city, postal code, country. Okay. So yes, when you're working with SQL, normally you find yourself doing that. And what's going to happen is you're going to have you can have 20 fields in a table, and only 5 of those you need to insert, and then the rest is probably generated somehow, or maybe has some default values. But this is the proper way that you want to get used to when inserting values into a table. And then you pass values for that in the exact same order that you listed the fields here. So in this case, it would be the customer name. Let's say I'm going to pick someone from Slack. kinda. I'm gonna, because I'm not show the whole name, I'm gonna just do this, right? Right, part of it. Of course, this is going to be a string. Oh, when you're dealing with strings in SQL, even though this tool may support this, in SQL, the standard, strings are enclosed in single quotes, always. Again, there may be some tools, there may be some GUIs, there may be some database management systems that support double quotes, but the standard is single quotes. So please, just use those. No, that's not his real name, just some people in the video. It's not going to be the full name. I don't want to have that on the video, but it's kind of close. It's close. Um, that would be the contact name. Oh, this is the customer name. Is actually the company. So let's awesome devs, right? And then this is the contact in that company, and then the address would be one drive, maybe. I mean, there's a one Microsoft drive, so why not? Right? One Facebook drive, one Google drive. So the city would be probably in Provo, Utah, of course. That's where. What else? It's like the best place in the world. Actually, it's a postal code. So let's pass a postal code here that says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then a country would be USA, of course. So an insert command is insert into the name of the table, and then in parentheses, you pass the fields in the order that you want to insert them, and then values, and then you pass values for those fields. That's it. On SQL, one was inserted. So now if we come back, comment this out, not with this, but with this, we say select star from customers, order by one descending. Hey, what is this magic, Luis? Well, it turns out now for quick. I mean, don't get into the habit of doing that, but for a quick, let me go and check if this word thing, like in this case, you could positionally starting at one, you could pick the columns in the order by, same thing with the group by, just by passing the number. So what I'm saying is order it by the first column from left to right, make it descending. I just want to see the last record that was inserted. Make sure that the data is there. Questions there for the insert? Okay, questions? Try it out. Insert a record for yourself in your version of this on your database. And let me know. So the next one is update. After we do this, right? Everybody's there. Okay, so let's keep this down here. We're going to use it again. So what about an update? Well, if I want to update data, yeah, you do update. But here's the thing, though. Here's a gotcha. If I do this, I'm going to take, if you can see the country here, I'm going to do this. I'm going to say update customers set the country equal to USA. So I'm going to ask you to type again. We're going to do a little exercise. You're going to type something and you're not going to enter until I say go. So what I want you to tell me is, what do you think it's going to happen when I run this command? Go. Yeah. it's going to change, it's going to update the country for all the records. So this is a very dangerous operation, and it's the same with the delete. So what I normally do is that I write a select, okay, and then I keep this update here, comment out. It works better on the tool that I'm used to, which is a Microsoft tool. But here's the idea. I do that, so the way that I avoid updating all the records is by filtering the records that I want to update, right? So I write a where in here. Where, let's say that I want to change the customer ID equals 92, the record that we updated. And I want to change this to be United States of America. Okay. So we're updating to the United States of America, the country, but we only want to update that for the customer ID is 92. So we run the query first. I confirm that this is actually the record that I want to update. Yes, I'm good. So, and then I go back, and in this case, I have to comment and uncomment, but that's fine. In other tools, you could just select the query from there, and it will work, right? Even if you have the select up there. Some query tools, like the one that I'm used to, will let you highlight a piece of the code and will just execute the code that is highlighted. But this works. Okay, so that was updated. Let's go back and we say, let me see if that was updated really. Here we go. And now we have United States of America. Perfect. So that is how the update works. The gotcha here and the little trick is doing something like this, where you make sure that you first run a select, and then after you're sure that you have the records that you want to update, then you go and do your update. Probably what I wanted to do here is something like when the country used to be USA, right? So we do this and say, okay, everybody with USA, I'm going to update that to be United States of America. And now you go and run that. Because normally there's more than one, right? 13 records got updated in this query now. Now we could do this, which we have 0 records, right? But if we go and say now, like United, let's see if there's something else that begins with Unite. Run that, yep, United States of America. Very good. Okay, questions there? All right. So what if I wanted to delete that last record that I inserted, that record number 92? Well, simple enough. And of course, we're going to do the same thing that we did before, right? And again, let's go and comment this out, keep it there. So let's see how to delete. I'm going to say select customers. I have this customer 92 up here at the top, and I like to delete that one, right? So let's go and do this. The way to do a delete is with the delete command. Delete. Again, you want to do that select to make sure that you're deleting the right record. So first, we're going to say select start from customers, so that we can make sure that the where is working, is doing what we think. Where customer ID equals 92. Now, I first run that, make sure, yeah, this is the one that I want to delete, and then I go ahead and do delete. So I'm going to delete this, delete, and the delete is as simple as, you know, saying I want to delete from where? From the customers table. And then just the where is where the key happens, right? This is filters the records that you want to delete. And then running that means that if I now go and do the select, it should get no records because the record was in fact deleted from the database. There you go. Nothing on the database. Of course, again, using our other query right there, we see that the last record that we have is record 91 now, right at the top. No magic in there. Questions, if you don't have any questions, here's kind of the code we have. I find that this is kind of way too easy to take too long in it. So let's say, why would we want to get into that habit? Why wouldn't, what do you mean? You want to get into the habit of doing this. What I said is, what habit are you, I mean, clarify it for me. Ah, okay. Do you remember when I said that? Ah, I know what you mean. It's probably the habit of doing by numbers, like this right here, right? Yep, okay. No, again, this is opinion. Remember, this is all opinion. When it comes to things like little things like that, I say don't get into the habit of using the number on your regular queries because later you can come back and change the order of the fields here, and it will break that. It will break the order by ID. So if I'm getting like customer ID, contact name, and then customer name and city, and I say order by one, it will be customer ID. But if later someone says, no, I like to see the country first before I see anything else, and comes here and adds the country, and again, this is a single line statement, so it's easy to see. But you will find yourself writing more complex query statements. And if you go and do that, now this is no longer updated. It's no longer ordered by the what you wanted to, which is the ID. See, now we got ordered by actually by the country because you were relying on position. Now, if this was always customer ID, you can move around the fields as many as you want, and you're always gonna get that record order the way that you wanted it, right? So that's why I said, don't get into the habit of using it, but for quick things like that, you could definitely use it. But when you're gonna commit to having a query that has a few fields, and maybe you may be ordering by not only customer ID, but you could say by customer ID descending, and then by the country ascending. That's not gonna do anything, but let's do it the other way around. Country first, and then customer ID. So country ascending, and then customer ID descending. So by doing that, first by the country, and then within each country, like Argentina, the customer ID descending. So be more explicit when using group bys and order bys. That's what I meant. Okay? All right. If we don't have any more questions, I'd like to move to talk about how can I use the knowledge that I have of databases, but I wanna use a database from my API. Okay? So hopefully I'm gonna do a yes, no, but I know the answer is gonna be yes. Just know when they forked and clone and installed dependencies, right? And we'd like to move into here. So I forked, clone the repository, run yarn to get the packages, and then yarn server to run the server, and it's running on port 5000, or so it says. Okay, let's go and grab our Insomnia client. Move over here. Let's see if that works. Yay. And it says that it's in port 5000, so let's do localhost 5000. Dismiss. And no, not HTTPS, but HTTP. Let's try it out now. And cannot post. Ah, come on, come on. Get, make it a get. Okay, can I get to slash? Yeah, that makes sense because we don't have any slash on our project. What we have, if you go check out the API on the server, you have this roles router over here that we're using, right, for the roles. So everything is going to be slash API slash roles. And if we go in here, slash API slash role, and it's going to give us slash API slash roles. It's going to give us some instructions. Say, hey, write some code to retrieve all the roles. That's our job. We're going to do that next. Or next. Okay, this is still showing up there. All right. So before we do that, I want to have a small conversation about how we're going to do this from the point of view of our API. So let's have a notes that in here. And let's talk and write some stuff here. So we have our API on one end, and this is going to communicate somehow with the database. And remember, this database could be a server, right? It could be a database server. In our case, it's just going to be our file, our database file here. On the other end of that, you have the client, right? The client talks to the API, the API talks to the database. That's a regular 3-layer system where you have at least a client, some kind of client that is connecting to a server, and this is going to be probably running on a web server. And this web server is going to connect to a different computer, a different server where the database is running. Okay, so think of this conceptually on this scenario, even though we're using a local database in there as a file. Now, the API, the client needs a way to communicate to the API, and we do this. We know we use HTTP, and we use something like fetch or Axios to talk over HTTP. But then the communication between the API and the database is not going to happen necessarily. It could, but it's not going to happen necessarily over HTTP. Most database management systems have some kind of proprietary closed source protocol. So instead of using necessarily HTTP, they might be using a different protocol, a different set of rules in order to communicate from a client of the database and the database server. So the communication channel that you use is going to be different from HTTP. What that means is that whatever is connecting to the database need to understand how to communicate over that protocol. See, Axios knows how to communicate over HTTP. The browser knows how to communicate over HTTP. But if we're using, let's say, Microsoft SQL Server, they have this special network technology in order to communicate to their server, to their Microsoft SQL Server. So for that, we need in here, somehow inside of our API, we need to have some kind of adapter. So we're going to have our API have an adapter, and the adapter is the one that knows how to talk that language to talk to the database. Okay? And that'd be nice. So that would mean that if you know how to talk to the adapter has an API that you could talk to. Now you could assemble your queries and then use that adapter to communicate to the database. Okay? Yeah, talk that language. So the language of the networking technology that you're using to connect to the database. But we learned early on that manipulating the DOM directly is a lot of work, so we use React. And then we learned that, doing all of the headers and all the networking information that we need in order to build an API is a lot of work that we would be repeating. So what did we do? Well, we looked for a framework, and we used Express for that, so that we have a nicer API. This is the same thing. You don't want to talk directly to an adapter on a database and write all your queries manually. So we look for a better abstraction that is going to give us a nice API for us to perform operation against the database. And here's another thing. Even though there is a standard for SQL, each database management system may end up having extra functionality or tweaking the way that something is done just a little bit, just enough to annoy you if you're trying to connect directly to a database using raw SQL. Let me show you what I mean, okay, so that you have an idea of how painful that is. If I go and do T-SQL, create table, we're gonna get the command to do a create table on SQL Server. This is how you do it. If you're writing SQL Server, you would need to use this command right here to create a table. Pick a column, data type, primary key. Now I'm going to do the same thing and say pSQL create table for Postgres, right? Create table, field name, constraint name. But if you look at, there you go. Look at how the primary key is now defined, right? As a constraint. It's different. No, I rather not learn, get out of my way. So my point is, if you look at both statements for the same exact command, there are going to be some nuances between them. They're going to be a little different. As I said, just enough to make it annoying for you to support more than one database management system eventually. They look the same, but there are some little things like this. See, primary key here, primary key, but then this is not helping me at all, because I want something that has a lot more to it. Foreign key, references, cells. Let's see if we have something here. I want to show you kind of how they move away from the standard real quick when you have to define other things like pSQL constraint, foreign key. I don't know how to add foreign keys and everything. Like this serial data type is what Microsoft SQL Server calls an identity. So if you're defining an identity, an auto increment in SQL Server, and then you move that code and you want to do that in Postgres, it's called a serial. So it's different. Now you have this different syntax for the same thing, and it means the same at the end of the day. Okay. The foreign key constraint, you say, customer ID is going to be an integer that references the customer ID. In SQL Server, you're saying foreign key, store ID references this. So it's a little bit, right? So what do? Again, we abstract that away, and we go into something that is going to take and standardize those differences so that we don't have to care about them. And a good tool for that is what's called a query builder. There are more levels than just a simple query builder when you're working with databases like that. But using there you go. Using a query builder is going to abstract away all of those little differences between the SQLs. So you're going to write, this was for adapters. What is that? Like middleware? Oh, yeah. Like middleware. An adapter, yeah, it's similar somehow, yeah. Similar to middleware, but it's more like a little package that you use to connect to something, like a connector. So you could think of this as translating between JavaScript and the relational database language. So the version of SQL that you can use. We picked one for you. There are many tools, and there are others that do even more than just a query builder. A query builder is a portion of another tool called an ORM, Object Relational Mapper. And the idea behind that is when I think of a we were doing students yesterday, right? So if I say const student in JavaScript, I think of this. It's got a name, it's got an age, it's got an email. Probably don't care about the age, so let's do name and email. So we think of curly braces. We think of a name, and then I'm gonna have a value here, and then I have an email, and then I'm gonna have a value here. And if I have a collection of cohorts the student has been at, I think of an array, right? This is what I'm thinking of in the JavaScript, in the programming language of my choice. But on the relational model, though, when I think about students, I'm thinking about a student as a row on a table. So that table looks like, you know, it's got a name column and it's got an email column, but then there's no cohorts anymore. Okay, because this cohort is a collection. So this cohorts is probably going to be a different table. So there is a translation that needs to happen between how the language sees this as an object and how the database sees that as a table. Okay, where now down here I have the name separated from the email, right? So I'm emailing here. And then I have the name down here. John. See? So that's something that we needed to solve. We needed to solve that problem where a table or student row, let's call it, record, looks more like, you know, a rectangle. Rows and columns. That's what a table looks like. While in our head, when we think of the same concept on the programming language, we think of objects, an array of objects. Okay. So this difference between the object, right? So this is object, and relations down here. That difference between the two was addressed by a tool called an ORM, because you're going to hear that. I want to mention it here. Object, right? Relational mapper. So what this does, these tools called ORMs, what they do is they translate between objects and relations on the database, back and forward, okay? And they do a lot more stuff. They know about relationships and all that, and you'll understand that more when we talk about relationships on day 4, I think. But for now, know that there are tools that do a lot for you. Now, most ORMs, or if not all ORMs, will include, right? ORMs include a query builder. A query builder is a simple tool. So a query builder translate from a programming language to SQL, back and forward, right? So you write in JavaScript and it will generate SQL for you. And when the data comes back from the database, it's going to take that and translate it into JavaScript objects. Questions there? Next, right here, Next.js happens to be a query builder. So what can you do with it? Well, you could do selects, you could do inserts, you could do updates, you can create tables, you can modify tables, you can add indexes, you can delete records. And tomorrow, we're going to see something pretty cool called migrations to match the schema of your database. So how can I use it? If I was you, I was like, okay, how can I take that and so that I can go and complete the requirement of getting a list of information from a database? Well, the first thing is we need the database. We don't have a database in this project yet. So as you follow along with me now, this is going to be our first step. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to use SQLite Studio steps. Let's call it steps here. So the first one, we need to create a database. Then we need to add a table. And this is about roles, I think. So it's going to be a roles table to the database. And now, and later, after we're done with that, we're going to connect. We're going to bring in install connects. And then we're going to configure it to talk to our database. Okay, it needs to know how to talk to it. It needs to know what it is, what's the file name and all that. And then after that, we're gonna implement the list all roles. Okay, and then we're gonna add a role, and we're going to remove a role. And of course, we have the updated role if we have time, but it's gonna be a combination of, you know, reading data and just calling update. Maybe somewhere in there we do a list a role by ID. Okay. So this is our roadmap. It's called a roadmap. Let's tackle the first step right there. Create a database. What tool can I use to create a database? If I want to create a database in here, I'm gonna go and create a folder for this and call it database. Why not? Yeah, call it data. What tool can we use in order to create a database? Yeah, SQLite Studio, right? SQLite Studio. So let's go and create a database. It's gonna be for roles. So again, real quick, because we already know how to do that. We have this button here, create a database. It's gonna be SQLite 3. It's a new one. I'm gonna go and find WEB18. So I'm using the DB2 guided. Inside of this data folder, I'm gonna call this Rolex and select down here SQLite 3 so that it creates Rolex.db3. If not, we just change the name here and we're gonna call this Rolex. Yeah, why not? Like so. Okay, now we have that database. Double click to connect to it, right click to create a new table. We're gonna call this roles and add a column to it. It's gonna be our ID integer. It's gonna be the primary key configured to make it auto increment. Click apply, click OK. Click another column. We're gonna call it name. This is gonna be the name of the role. It's gonna be a var car. Okay, the size 255, no more than that. Why? And then we're gonna make it unique. I'm gonna configure this and say on conflict, I want to do abort. Well, no need. I think I'm gonna just leave it like that. Not make it complicated, but I'm gonna make it not null and mark it as unique. See if I can collect this to use the, nah, just leave it like that. All right. Where's my okay? Where was my okay? Tooling. Name, car, 255, primary key. Not primary key, sorry. Unique and not null. I don't know why that did that. All right. So here we are. We're ready to go. We have a table, save that to the database, and now I have an ID and a name. Starting working on our roles. And the table is called roles. If you go and look here, I have roles in there. Okay, your job is go and create that table. How do you know that you created and it's there? Well, if you look at the data, there's no data there, but at least you know the structure is there. And this button, remember to click it so that you can save your stuff. Now, if we go back to Visual Studio Code and open the data folder, if it's not there, just hit this refresh button. You can see that we have this Rolex.db3 file in there. So we created that outside of Visual Studio Code with SQLite Studio. Go and create the same structure that I have here. Go. This is on a primary key and it's going to be auto increment. So it should be not null. If it makes you feel better, we can mark it here, say not null. Okay, and now it's good. By making it auto increment, it's going to start always at 1. So that's pretty much going to guarantee that you never have a null value in there, but good point. So we made it auto increment. So anybody that doesn't need a review can go ahead and go and create it. I'm gonna walk through the steps again real quick just to help out, right? So I'm gonna do it through the menus this time. Database, add database, SQLite 3, click the add button here, find the place to save your database. I'm gonna do it on the desktop this time, roles DB. And then select down here SQLite 3, or if you save it, there, you can change the name here. Just make sure that this is not DB. Make it DB3 so that it's safer. This is the name that is going to show up here on the side. So if you say roles DB, click OK. Now you have the database created, but you're not connected to it yet. So double click to connect. Right click on the tables and do create table. And here's where you say roles. And then click this button right here to add a column, ID, integer, primary key, configure, auto increment, apply. And if it makes you feel better, do it not know, well, do OK. Another column, name, make it a string, give it a length. I'm making mine unique because I don't want two rows with the same name. It will make no sense, right? I'm making it not null. I want to have a value there. And of course, you need to click this save button here. This is the same steps that you did yesterday on your project, right? So I won't fast through them because it's just kind of a refresher of the stuff that you have from yesterday. Let's see where we are. Looks like only 16 out of 60, about 55 people have completed it. So if we do this, revealing Finder, an alternative, if you're going, if you're having an issue, creating it is, I just uploaded the file. Let's see if Slack does not complain about it. Yep, it's a 20 kilobyte file. So you can also practice that later, and you get down like creating, because that's part of yesterday's lecture, right? And we want to move on with today's lecture. You grab that file and just drop it inside of your data folder. It's the same file that I have, rolex.db3. And that should put you where I'm at. This is done. We created the table. This is done. Now we need to install next. So I'm going to stop, make sure that everybody's good with me. So if you're not with me, tell me on Slack that you're still copying or creating that database. If not, I'll assume that you have it. All right, so we have it. Cool. All right. So I know that I have this roles table in there, so I can connect to it. But first, we need to install next, right? So let's go into the command line and do yarn add next. Now, we said, though, that when we communicate from our database, we're going to connect with some kind of adapter. So this picture is actually not complete, right? We're going to use a query builder connects plus an adapter in order to connect to the database. Why is that? Well, if Next can translate between different database management systems, and each database management system has its own adapter for it, that means that Connect is outside of it. So actually what you have is your API is going to be talking to Connect, and then Connect is going to use an adapter. It's going to talk to that adapter, and the adapter is the one that's going to be in charge of talking to the database. So this is actually what's going on inside of your API. Your API code talks to the library. The library uses an adapter to talk to the particular database that you're using. Since we're going to be using SQLite 3, and this is going to be different depending on what you're using, you may use more than one. Maybe you want to support another database like MySQL, then you would have different adapters, one for SQLite and one for MySQL. Does that make sense? So we need to add not only next, but we also need to add the adapter. And the adapter that there are more than one. We're going to use one called SQLite 3. So this is your command in order to install that. On Slack. Okay. So now if we go and check out the package.json, we should have dependencies for 2 new files. And here they are, next and SQLite 3. We can close this now. We know that this is going to be running on the background. All right, so we install next. And the adapter, SQLite 3. Now we need to configure Next to talk to our database. Why is that? Well, because Next doesn't know where the database is. We know that we have it inside data and it's called RolexDB, but Next doesn't know that. Okay, so that's the next step. Can I continue? Yes or no? Please answer no if you're still kind of catching on. This is where the meat of the lecture begins. This is the important part right here. If we don't get this done, everything breaks. So I'm gonna wait for you and help you out if you're not there. If you're having problems creating the database, just download that RolexDB3 file, drop it in Visual Studio Code, and use that. Okay, don't let that stop you. That's not. You're gonna learn a different way of doing that tomorrow, of creating that from JavaScript. So don't let that stop you for now. That's a UI thing. You'll get it. Don't worry. That's a great idea. We're gonna take a break after we see what Anthony needs help. Anthony? Okay, so done. So let's take a 5-minute break, and then when we come back, we continue to configure next. That's a great idea. Thank you. Let's go and take 5 minutes and see you in 5. All right, and we're back. So we're going into our next step. Configure next to talk to our database. So we need to find a place to do that. Since we're only using next, and we'll learn other patterns as we go forward, right? But since we're also going to be using next from here to access the data from our router, we're going to do it right here, right in place over here, okay? So we create the router there, and then we're going to bring in next right after the router, okay? So it's going to do, well, doesn't matter, we could do it before. Say, we're going to bring next from next, okay? Once we have it, we want to configure it somewhere on here. Okay, so we're gonna go back from how do we use it to get, let's say I want to get a list of the roles, how we use it, and then see what we need to get to that stage. So ideally, what I want to be able to do down here is something like this, where I'd say, you know, I have some connection to my database. We could call it whatever we want, depending on the technology that you're using. This could be called a context. I'm gonna call it DB. Okay, and if you had that instance of next already configured to talk to a database, you can then say DB roles, and this right here, this is enough to return a promise with all the roles, on the table, whatever table you pass in the name here. So this is going to be a promise. That means that you need to do that and catch and all that. But this is how we want to do it, right? Now I need this DB thing. So it would be const DB equals, and the way that you use next is you say, what you're getting is a connection, a version of next that is already configured to talk to your database. This is what we want to get here. And the way that you do that is by calling next as a function and passing a configuration object. So I'm going to call this next config. Okay. Again, going backwards. Once we have it, we can connect to it and say, hey, grab me the data from the roles table. In order to have that configured next version, we're going to say next as a function and pass a configuration object. We don't have that object, so let's go and create it over here. And it's going to be an object. And if you were next and you were talking to me and I say, hey, next, I want you to connect to my database and give me the roles, what would you ask me if you were next? Where is the database, right? That's a good question. What is the database? Okay. Yeah, also, what type of database? Very good. Those are valid questions, right? And if you're using a server, the database server, when you go and ask for data, it's going to tell you, I don't know who you are, tell me who you are. So it's going to ask you for credentials. SQLite is not going to do that. So you don't have to worry about the credential portion, but at least you need to tell next what kind of database is it. We could say it in a different way by saying which adapter am I going to use, okay? And there are a couple of syntaxes for this. We're going to use one called a client. There's a property called client that you can use to specify the adapter. The adapter that we install is called SQLite 3, okay? So we're saying, I want you to use this adapter in order to connect to the database. And then the other one is where to find it. Where is the database? Well, in database terms, when you're using tools like this, ORMs or whatever, we call this a connection string. It's a way for you to define how do you connect to a database. So there is a connection property here. In the case of next, you can pass, this could be a string or object. We're going to be using the object syntax for this example. But know that it's going to work the same if you're using a string, okay? Now, within that object though, and I want you to notice something with this, and it's something that bugs me a lot, and that means that I make a lot of mistakes when I was doing this, because it's kind of bugged me that you have file name, but it's not on the JavaScript kind of way, even though it's a JavaScript library, right? You would expect that this would be a file name, but it's not. So just keep that in mind. On this particular tool, is file name all lowercase for this property. Not all of them are like that. And this is going to take a string, and this is going to be a path. And this is important. That got me a couple of times. Is from the root folder. It's not from the rows router. It's from the root folder down here. So if I'm going to provide a relative path from down here to find the database, it would be from the root slash into the data folder slash rolex.db 3. I find that it takes a lot more effort to try and explain the steps step by step than actually seeing it in action. Okay. So let me finish that. Then we're going to do a review, and then it's going to be your turn. Now that you know that you assemble a configuration object, and then you call connects, and you pass that configuration object, and then you're going to get like a connection to your database. And now you can use that connection to your database in order to talk to a particular table. And there are different syntaxes from this. And remember that this returns a promise. So we're going to do that, then that catch right there. This might run into an error for sure. So if we run into an error, or probably want to do something with that error, for now, let's say console.log the error. But if it works though, that means that you're going to get the roles back. I hope, right? So if you don't have any errors connecting to the database, like if I make a mistake here and do like Rolexes, something like that, right? It's not going to be able to connect to the database, and then it's going to run into an error. You get that catch. But if we do have the data though, now you can send it back to the client. So rest status, let's say 200.json, passing in the roles. There are none on the database yet. But if there is no data on the database, what you're going to get back is an empty array. Let's try it out. So if we go back, let's do it on Insomnia this time, right? And do send. This is saved and running. I don't know. Did I save this? Is it running? Let's try it out. Oh, it's not. Made a mistake. Okay, that's it. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I forget this property all the time. Look at this. So since we're using SQLite 3, this is telling you SQLite does not support insert default values anymore. So you need to have this key. So you're going to get this message. It's a good thing that happened to me, right? Because all you have to do is add this property and make it true, and that will work perfectly. That's all you need. This is only needed when using SQLite 3, just because of the way SQLite works internally. Okay, so you're gonna get this message right here, and we have this DB roles that, and then of course we need to remove this code right there. Okay, so let's run it. Yarn server. Hopefully we don't have any more errors. And good. Okay. Let's try it out. There we go. Ha! Empty array. Okay. So review, and then your turn. This is where we are. And we have code to list all the roles. Okay. Cool. Let's see. So first we need to bring in Next and an adapter. So we installed Next and the SQLite 3 adapter. Then we need to configure it. For that, we need an object, right? So we went into the roles router, brought next in, created an object to configure it. And we need to tell that object, here's the client that I'm using, SQLite3, the NPM package that we installed. Here's how you're going to connect to the database by passing a connection object with a file name property or lowercase that points from the root folder a relative path to find our database file. And since we're using SQLite3, we need to add this extra property, use null as default. Let me actually copy that for you to avoid typos. And that is our configuration object right there. Now, all we have to do is call next, passing that configuration object, and that's going to give us a version of next that represents a connection to our database. And you could call this anything you want. Okay, I decided to call it DB. So in my mind, this is, hey, I'm talking to the database. Okay. Now, in order, and again, if we go back into the documentation for next, you will see that on the query builder, you have different ways. If you go check out the select, which is what we're doing, you could do next.select, and this would be DB, right? This is like the configured version that we have. It would be db.select, and you could do it this way. A shorthand is by just saying DB and passing the name of the table that you want to talk to, and then you start adding commands in there. So this is shortcut. I will be using this shortcut. Instead of having to type select and all that, I'm just going to be doing this. If I wanted to select different fields, you'll see how to do that later. But this is enough to say, give me all the data, all the fields. It's like select star from rows. This is what it translates to. Okay, so basically this is select star from rows. By the way, there is a debug here, debug true, that you can add to this. And let me show you what happens when we run a command now. Oh. No. Look at the terminal here. Send this command again. And there you go. You could see the SQL command that was executed. So let's start from rows. Pretty cool when you're, development and you want to check out what SQL statement is being created. Why is this not working? This is going to tell you exactly what SQL command was executed there. So I'm going to comment this out. So it's going to get annoying real fast. Your turn. Go and see if you could get the list of roles, or at least get an empty array. All right. I see an error that says that the roles table does not exist. Just copy the file that I sent you. And if you had any file there, just get rid of it and just copy the file that I sent you. This is actually telling you what's going on. It's telling you that the database doesn't have the roles table. Probably you didn't save it if you create it manually. Good news though is that it's stuck into your database, whatever database you're having there. So right click on this, revealing Finder of Explorer if it's Windows. This is going to show you the folder, right? So right click somewhere here in the gray area, reveal in Finder or Explorer. It's going to take you to your folder. Go into the data folder there. Take whatever database is there. If you're in Windows, you may need to close Visual Studio and SQLite because it's going to be protected. It's going to be locked. Delete that and replace it with this database, because we know that this database has the role table in there. So make sure that it's deleted. There's nothing inside the data folder first, and then drag the one from Slack. Again, you did the connection correctly, so that's good. You actually connected to the database. You was able to look inside the database and say, hey, I don't see the roles table in here. So you're good to go, only missing the roles table. That's a good error to have. So out of 55, only 16 people have it. And only 21 people are actually participating in the lecture. Judging for the numbers, right? Okay, 31, better. Now all of you are having me practicing math here. I have to be adding those numbers, like, yes or no. Let's see, I have 37 now. Yeah, good. Now in my head it's like, okay, from 37 to 55, how many do I need? I have good news though. I have good news. The good news is once you get this done, the plumbing for this first part, then everything works. It's just running commands and writing your endpoints. This is the hardest part by far. So let's get this done for everybody, and then you see that everything else is just smooth sailing from here. And I don't remember how to do it. So all you do is you keep that code as reference. Every time you need to connect to SQLite, go back and just copy that code. You keep it as reference there. So don't try to memorize it. Just get it done and understand how it works. All right. So let's see where we are. Right. Everybody has the database, right? Any errors that we may have. Let's go and do a quick review to see if we can solve them by ourselves. If not, then we're going to do a screen share and do some team programming on it. So install the library, brought it in, added this configuration object, instantiated the connection to the database, right, by passing the configuration object. And then we updated the code on the /API/roles route, this one right here. So remember that when you're testing this is going to be on /API/roles, doing a get. Okay, this is how you test it. And this is what we did, right? We got rid of all the code that was there. So this was empty. And we say, hey, database, give me the roles table, the data on the roles table. And then we call then and catch. There's no res.send on here. If you do, you're gonna get an error that says you cannot send headers after they are sent. Why? Because this is outside of the promise handling. So the sending of data should be either inside the then or inside the catch function. Okay, here we will do something like res.status 500.json, and then let's just send the error now for now, just to see what it is, if it breaks. And that is it. And then going to doing a get to /api/roles should give you an empty array. If not, it is time for team programming. So Mario first, just because he started, right? He was the first one to tell me, hey, I'm running into an issue. I need help. Let me make sure that I have Slack here. And I'm looking at Slack on the other screen. Mario works! Yay! Anybody else? Let me see. Who else has... All right, Josie. I'm looking at the list, the way that it shows here. Would you like to share? We definitely want you to share. There you go. Excellent. Excellent. So the first question would be, what is the error that we are getting? Well, what endpoint are you hitting with that get? What is the URL? What is the address? When you hit the roles router, what is the address that we're using to test that? /API/ let's see if I can figure it out. Oh, you took the fun out of it. Yeah, that works. It's been working for you. Okay, who's next? Mystery solved. Tim, your turn. So what is the error that we are getting? So talk to me, tell me, what is the error? Do you read the error? What is it saying? Yep, exactly right. Ha-ha! Success! Good job fixing it yourself. Ha-ha! All right, anybody else? And I'm looking at team, was there 41, and team that would be 42. We have some people kind of quiet in there that are not telling me whether it works or not. Good job, good job, good job. Thanks for sharing. If I could just figure out how to tell Zoom to stay where I put that UI and not move it every time to that screen, that would be nice. Zoom people that you're watching this video. All right. You feel what? No, you feel like you learned something, which is great. Okay. So what about by ID? Aha. Before we implement that, this endpoint right here, let's remember how this works, right? What I want to do is I want to do something like select from roles where ID is going to be equal to, you know, whatever ID they give me. This is what I'm looking at, right? So let's see if we can figure that one out. And of course, we don't have any roles in there. So actually, let's just leave that one for next. Let's do first, let's add a role. Let's do that one, okay? Let's add a role. Let's do this one. Let's complete that one first. Then we do the list. So to add a role, it would be something like this. What we want to do is insert into roles, right? And then passing the fields that we want, values, passing the values that we want. And these values are probably going to come from the body. Whatever comes in the body, that object, we're going to pass that to our insert. Okay? This is what we're looking at in terms of raw SQL. Insert into roles, passing the collection of columns, values, and then passing the values. Let's see if there is a way to do an insert by using next. Let's see, maybe if we go into the query builder right here, we have select, ask, column, from, where methods, a whole bunch of where methods. Look at that. Join methods, we'll learn about all that later. Not today, but later. On, having, clear, limit. Oh, look at the limit is there. Excellent. We could use that. The distinct is also there. Order by is there. Oh, look at that. Insert, update. I bet you there's probably a delete. Oh, look, delete. So let's take a look at this insert right here. Oh, what can I do with this? Well, here we have the short syntax where they say, you know, you use your connection, passing the table name, and then you call insert, passing an object that has the information that you want to pass to it. Let's try that. Let's try doing that, exactly that. Only that we call our version of connects DB, so we're going to say DB roles, that insert, and then we want to pass an object that has the data. So we're going to ask our clients, we're going to say the data that you want to insert into the roles, you need to pass me an object as part of the request.body. So give me the data in the body of the request so that we can read it. Say rec.body. Okay. We're not validating or anything. We're just saying we're assuming that we're getting all the data that we need. If we don't get all the data that we need, there's going to be an error thrown out by the database. Why? Because we said that the name is not null. So if we pass an empty value for the name, we're going to get an error. And we want that. We want the database to help us make sure that not invalid data goes into our database. Okay? So we're following the documentation here. Why? Because I'm going to show you how to do 3 or 4 things, but then the rest you have to go into the documentation. So get used to coming back here and doing a search and see if you can find it. Like if I was looking for that insert, I would probably just say Command F and say, is that a kind of a dot insert? Okay, and you'll see examples of it. 19 instances of that. So eventually you're going to run into this insert data. Also, one thing that I'm going to call your attention is they normally, when there's something special about something, there's going to be no surprises for you. They're going to have an explanation of how it works. Like in this case, when you're using other databases, you're going to have this returning method. And then it's going to tell you, well, you could either pass in a hash of properties to insert it into a row or an array of inserts. So that means that I could pass an array of objects and it will insert all of those objects at the same time into the database. Well, not technically the same time, but we will insert all of them. So it doesn't have to be one at a time. If you have a collection of data, an array of data, you can say, hey, insert all this data in this table. And the tool is going to do what it needs to do to have them all inserted. If you pass an array as a second argument, look at this. These square brackets here that says returning square brackets means this is optional. Don't confuse that with being an array. Turns out that returning is an array, but the brackets mean, in the documentation means, is optional. Okay? You could pass an array like this, like ID title, and when the promise is resolved, the data that you get back is going to be whatever values you pass in here. So if I wanted to get the name back, I could pass in an array in there on the insert as the second argument here. I could say insert body, and then as a second argument, pass an array that says name. This is what I want to get back. Okay? And of course, this is a promise. So I need then and catch. I'm going to leave the catch because I'm just going to copy it from there. And we know that we get some response from the database, results. Let's call it results from the database. And I'm going to do first a console.log in here of the results, or just send it back, and then we see it on the tool. So res that status is going to be 200.json, sending back the results. Let's see what we get. Another thing that I'm interested in, though, is what happens if I get an error? What error am I going to get? So let's add that, and then we're going to send it instead of console login. We're just going to send it back. Save that, and here we go. So DB roles, insert, pass in the body, and I want to get back the name. Then the results. Let's see what we get back. Let's see what happens if I do a valid insert, and what happens if I pass an empty value. So let's go into our Postman. I think we have a post in here that we could do. Localhost 5000 /API/roles. Okay, now in the body, it's going to be, let me just rename this because this is bugging me. How do I rename it? Settings? Yeah, it's going to be a post. Excellent. So I know this is the get. And this is the post. So in my post, in the body, I'm gonna say I'm gonna send some JSON there. Write that JSON with the names property of students. Student is the name of the role. Send that, and we get an error, a SQLite error number 1. I don't know what it is, but I have an error from the database. Normally related with violating a constraint. Okay, so probably our server broke. Okay, returning is not supported by SQLite 3 and will not have any effect. Okay, I wanted you to see this error, this warning. And I wanted to have the error. This is why I named it names, just to show you the error. Okay, so 2 things. First, we did get the error from the database, so the data was not inserted. And 2, I wanted you to see this. Okay, this is something you're going to run into only with SQLite 3. All of the other major database vendors like MySQL or Postgres, they're going to support it. Well, not all of them, but most of them, right? Because this is not immediately evident on the documentation. The documentation shows that the other way around. The documentation is going to tell you, if you go click on the returning method here, it's going to mention the places where you can use it instead of telling you SQLite doesn't support it. By default, in SQLite 3, you will always get an array. Oh, there it is, right there. An array that has the last ID inserted. So if I pass 10 records, the ID of the last inserted record, that's the value that I'm going to get in that array. So if we get rid of that returning now, over here, and again, you could pass it an ID as a string like that, and that would work. Okay, if we do that, we're not going to get that error. And of course, we probably want to have this be named now, so you see it inserted something. So we do that, 200, okay. And here's what you get. You get an array that has the number 1 because it's the first record. So if I add another one like TA, maybe another row, and we send that, we're going to get number 2 in there because that's the ID of the second record. So if we don't undo the get, we'll see that we have 2 records now in our database, student and TA. Okay. So going back into our code, see, returning is not supported by SQLite 3, will not have any effect. This is a warning, not an error. This is a warning that is telling you, yeah, you have it there, but I'm not going to do anything with it. I'm always going to return just the ID. But I'm going to ask you that you keep it there, though. And the reason for that is when you move to, I think Postgres requires it. Let me make sure because I don't know exactly. In Postgres, unless you provide this returning, you're going to get an empty array. So in PostgreSQL, you need to have it. So when we move to using Postgres on Heroku, you want to have that ID in there. So from now on, I want you to ignore that warning and always keep that ID as the second argument when you're doing the inserts. Just to future-proof your code so that when you move to Heroku Postgres, you have that solved. Questions there? So for databases that support it, you should be able to say, I would like to see back the ID and let's say the name. Those are the 2 fields that I want to get back. Okay, but since we're not supported that, you don't even need the array anymore. You just pass a string like that and it will work. So on PostgreSQL, you could return not only the ID, you could return the ID, the name, and any other properties that you want. So all you have to do is list the properties here as an array for the values that you want to get from the database. So if I wanted to get both the ID and the name, it would look like this. And then when Postgres sends back the response coming from Postgres, next we'll turn that and we'll give you the ID and the name for the inserted record. Okay. So why would you need to see the returning again, just as a check? Is that clear now, Mario? Yeah, cool. So why do we care about this? Well, what if you try to do the insert, but something happens that is not necessarily an error? How can you check that you actually inserted? Even better, let's say that you have some value on React, right? You read the name for React. You don't have the ID. You don't know what the ID is. But you want to have the ID on the client because that's the best way for you to do anything with the, like deleting or updating. You need to have the ID. But you don't have the ID until you insert it into the database because the ID is generated by the database in this example, right? Now, let's say that whatever information you're saving has 10 fields. And you send those fields from the client to the server, to the API. When the data is persisted, you're going to get the ID of that record that you inserted. Do you need to send all 20 fields back to the client? The answer is no, because they're already there. The client had that information in the first place. All the client needs now is to complete that record is any data that was generated by the database. So instead of you sending back all 10 fields again to the client, you say, here's the ID, by the way, which is the only thing that you're missing. So having that ID is useful. There are other scenarios, but that's one scenario where it's really useful to have it. But the learning here is reading the documentation. We could go and figure out what we're gonna get back, and the results is gonna tell us exactly what it is. We know that we get an array now of IDs, and this is how the library works. Can you what if I do something like this? What if I say, insert this, but I want to get back the whole inserted record, but the library is only sending you back the ID of the inserted record? What would you have to do then? Let's say that you wanted to get the ID back. I mean the record back. So this is teaching you, okay, sometimes I just don't have control over how a particular library or piece of software works, so I have to work around it. Yeah, you would have to make another request to your database. You don't have to make another request to the server. You could do that right here, like part of this post. So we're going to revisit this post back once we learn how to do a get by ID. Not here, but up here. A get by ID. Okay. Welcome back. We're gonna do it together, right? So let's fill in this data first. Now, remember that when using SQLite, even if you do not specify the returning ID, you're always gonna get an array with the last ID inserted. So if it's a single record that you're inserting, it's gonna be the ID of that record. If it's a collection, it's gonna be the ID of the last inserted record. Okay. And then we'll come back and make this a little bigger, a little better, like adding the ability to return back the whole record instead of just the ID. First, let's get you to implement the post as it is right there. So let's go try a post and see if you can insert records into your database. Let me know when you're done. When you can add data. How do you know it worked? When you go to Insomnia, you select JSON here on the body. When you're doing a post, not this one, this is on the post. Doing a post, select JSON, pass a name. You should get back an array that has the ID of the inserted row. Oh, interesting. Yes, SQLite constraint, error 19. So you have an idea what's going on there. Go and do a get. So what happens if I hit send again with a TA, right? Because we already know that we have a student and TA. So I'm going to try to do a post again with TA, and then I get this SQL constraint. And if we go and check out the get, it didn't get inserted. When we defined our database, the roles table, we said that the name should be unique. So the database is actually protecting you from violating that constraint. The database is telling you, you already have a TA, you can insert another one. So that's what the error 19 is about. Yep. So I'm going to quickly walk you through doing the next one, right? Because the mechanics is about the same, right? Now, I'm going to read the ID from where? Well, probably going to read the ID from the parameters. So what we want to do is use this where thing. If you go and check the documentation, you're going to find how to use the where. There are different ways of doing it. I'm going to show you a way of doing it, but you're going to find yourself looking at the documentation a lot. So you're going to be like, oh, how can I do a where? So let me try doing a search for that where. And this is what you're going to find, right? You can do it again, different ways. I'm going to use this one. I want to get the data from the roles. Where? And then you could pass an object, you could pass string separated by commas. I'm going to use the object syntax saying where the ID is rec.params.id. That then I should get back a role. And if I do get back that role, res.status 200 and send back the role. If I get an error, of course, I also want to get the error and send it back. Status. I mean, you do want to handle that, but for now, we're just learning about this, so we want to see what those errors look like. As simple as that. ADB roles where the ID is whatever you give me as the ID from the parameters. And that should give me back my role. Let's try it out. Okay, so if we go to, let's duplicate this. Well, no, let me just do it here. Say slash that 2, we should get back the TA. And here we go, we got the TA. Look at that. Do you see something weird here? What is strange about that response? It's an array. Why is that? Well, yes, supposed to be an array. Because how does the server know that you're looking, you're doing the search by the primary key? It doesn't. Remember that you could do a select, like when we did, oh, give me everything from, the United States. You could get more than one record. So every time you do a select with a where, you're expected to get an array back. But if you know, like in this case, you know that you're searching by the primary key, so you either get one record or no record at all, you could potentially fix it, right? You could say, oh, give me back, the first element on the array. Even if you do a distinct, you always get a collection back. Every time you run select, even if it's a single record, it's going to be a collection of a single record. So keep that in mind, because you might expect that you get the role, but you don't. You're going to get an array that has an element inside. So you could grab it this way. But this is such a common use case that instead of you having to drill into the array using the index, turns out that our friends at Next know that you do that a lot. So they provided a dot first method that you can call. And what this is going to do is just go into the results and just do this. Grab the first element. It's just giving you a shortcut to make it a little more clear visually. So if we do that now, save that, go back, and do the exact same request. Now we get the object back, which is what we expected was going to happen. You could have just explained that, Luis, from the get-go. No, I want you to look at, because what may happen is that, oh, I'm looking for the primary key, I should get just a single object back. No, it's always an array, okay? So what happens if I do, 3? I know that we don't have a number 4. If we do that, no response. We didn't get anything. Build week, maybe your backend forgot about that. Okay, there is no errors, but there is no data back. And the reason there is no data back is, yeah, because there is no data back. There is no record with the ID of 4. So if you're looking for something on the back end, looking for a particular resource, and the resource is not there, what would be a good status code that we can return for that? To tell the client, yeah, we didn't find it, it would be a 404. So since I know that after I call first, if I can find, if the library cannot find it in the database, this is not an error. This is just the table is there. I could connect. I checked, but the ID that you gave me, there's no records. Okay, so I could check for that. I could say if I have a role, perfect. I'm going to return that. Else, okay. So if I have a role, I'm going to return it. Else, I'm going to say res dot status. Yep, photo 4. And you could potentially send a message there, like maybe something like, message role not found. Okay, potentially. But the idea here is that you could inspect that. You could say, do I have it? Did I get it? If I did, then I'm going to return it. Otherwise, now I can have a way. Now I have a way to tell the client what happened. Here we go. Now we get a 404, not found. And then the client can react to that. Cool. And if we look for one of the existing ones, that still works fine. 404. Nice. That means that when we do our post now, if I wanted to send the whole record back, we could do something similar to what we did here. Okay? Because we already have that ID. We could say, hey, once you get the results from the post, instead of just sending back those results in here, right? After you get the results back, now I could say, actually, I want to make a call to this DB roles where, and it's not going to be the params.id anymore, it's going to be the ID that I have, right? After I insert that, what do we get? We get an array of IDs. So the results is actually an array of IDs. So the ID should be the first element of that array. Probably better if we do a 0 there. This is what it's looking like so far. We don't need to care about the role not found because we just inserted it. So in our case, where we're saying, I want to return that, the first element there, and if it works, I'm going to return back that role, and we probably don't care about any of this. So let's do it this way, just to clean it up a little more. I have the idea. Okay, this code would only execute if the insert is successful. Make sense? You don't need the return if you're not going to use the promise for anything else. You could do it this way too to clean it up so it looks a little cleaner. But the idea is I insert. I'm going to get the return. And if we want to make this a little better, we probably want to say something like, let's get rid of this. Instead of having this, we know that what we're going to get here is the IDs, an array of IDs, right? Just to make it a little cleaner. And then doing a post now, let's say that we want to have instructor as a potential role, send that, and we should get back the object itself. Okay, instead of just getting that array of the ID. A little more useful. So you don't need to change that right now. Don't do it, right? Because I'm going to give you this code anyways. But it's important that you understand what's going on. We're going to show you the remove. Probably leave the update to you. Nah, actually, I'm going to run it. All right, so let's say that we want to do an update. Turns out that we saw there is an update method, right? But remember the update and the delete? They have a particular property. When we were running them in the tool, I told you about a gotcha. You have to make sure that you do what when doing an update or a delete. If we're doing a delete or we're doing an update, where's the gotcha? Yes, yes. You need to filter the records. Otherwise, you're going to update or delete the whole thing, the whole table, all of the records in the table. It's the same thing here, right? So the way that you do an update is first you filter the records and then you update. If you're doing a delete, first you filter the records and then you do the delete. Make sense? Let's try it out. Let's say DB, I'm talking to the roles table again, and then first I'm going to filter where, you know, the ID is equal to rec.params .id, and then I can call the update. Okay. Now, the update's going to take the data, of course, the changes that you're going to apply, and it's pretty smart. Okay. Pretty smart. So we're going to read the updates from the body. And what I mean by it's pretty smart is if you have a table, a row that has 5 fields, but you only need to change one, like in our example, we only wanted to change the country. You don't have to pass the whole object. You just need to pass an object that has the one field that you want to update. So in this case, if you pass in the body an object that has only the name, it will only update the name. If you had like name and email, and you only pass the email, it would only update the email. So it's pretty smart. This update is pretty nice. It's going to kind of merge that into the object. And then what you're going to get back here, I'm going to tell you right away, but you could read it on the documentation. What you get back is the count of records that were updated. Because remember, this where can update more than one record. Not necessarily always it's going to be by the ID. So what you're going to get back is a count of all the records that were updated. And you could check. And you could say, hey, did I actually update? And you could check by count or count greater than 0. It's the same because 0 is a false value. But what I'm asking here is, do you update any records? Because if you did not update any records, that means that you didn't find it. There were no records for this particular filter right there. So in here, I could say res.status, photo 4. Yeah, I couldn't find that record to update it. Maybe a message that says record R role does not exist. Make it a friendly message that tells the client what happened. But then if you do have a count and the count is greater than 1, that means that you actually updated some data. Then you decide what you want to do here. Remember that what you got is the count. So you could say something like res.status, 200, everything was fine, and then maybe send back a message that says records updated. Actually, let's make this be like so. And that way I could just do, count here. Save that. Okay, it's looking good. Now, this could fail though, right? I could run into an issue here. So what do? Well, let's go and do a catch. We may have an error. It's not related to not finding it. It's just maybe we couldn't connect to the database or something. Status 500 JSON, and we're going to send the error to see what it is because we're learning about this stuff. We want to see those errors to see what they are. Let's go back and let's try it out. I'm going to take this post, duplicate that, give it a different name of put This is going to be my input now. And /API /roles, let's do a get first to see it. Okay, we have all of them. We have 1 to 3. Let's say that we decide that we're going to call this TA teacher's assistants, or maybe we want to update this to be say we don't have TAs anymore. Everybody, any PM can teach. So we're going to just call this PM. So let's do that. ID number 2. Let's go into a put and say ID number 2, and I'm going to change that to be PM instead. Send that, and oh, not found on the 2. Why is that? That shouldn't be. There was a 2. Let's see, where's the mistake? Help me find it. Can you help me troubleshoot this, please? Am I doing a post? You're so good. You're so good. I was like, how did I do that? Yeah, there we go. Now this is what we're going to see. One record updated. This is so bad. This is killing me. This thing. Is count greater than 1? Yes, then I want to see records. Otherwise, I want to see a record. Let's see if that does what I think it does. Yeah, I want record updated. There you go. Thank you for helping me troubleshoot that. I'm going to implement the delete real quick. Again, I'm not letting you do it because the mechanics is the same. I want you to look at the mechanics. The mechanics of this is filter the records and then call the update, passing the data. And then the rest is just checking that you got the stuff back. And what's important here is that on the insert, you get the collection of IDs. And on the update and the delete, you're going to get a count instead. So you work around the issues by saying, what is it that I want to return? And then you take advantage of whatever you have. In this case, you have the count. What would you do if you wanted to return the record? Well, you have the ID that you're updating. So nothing is stopping you from saying, hey, once I have a successful update, let me go and get that record by using that ID that I have and return that instead. Same thing that we did in the post. So know that you have all the tooling that you need in order to produce the response that you need on the client. Okay? So how do we do this? Well, watch. Boom. Rian. So instead of update, you have another method called delete. It could be delete, but you can also use the short one right here. We just delete the record once we find it. Let's go try it out. And of course, we need to delete. Let's just do this, duplicate this one, call this. It's my delete. Change this to be a delete, please. And say, let's go and delete the instructors. So that, yep, one record deleted. Let's see if it's true. Let's do the get. And the instructor is gone. So a question that I have there is try catch or then catch used more? Well, depends on how you want to handle promises. Try catch is used when you're using async and await. That is something that we're going to leave for you to explore. If you want to handle promises using async and await, there are really, really good posts and videos all over the net to teach you that. I used to teach it. Until the last group. But then I found that it got in the way of learning the stuff that you really care about, which is how can I connect to my database? Handling promises is something that you already know how to do very well using then and catch, because you have been doing this since the Axios days, right? So I'm just removing the noise so that you concentrate on what's important here is how does the insert works? How does the where works? How does the delete work? What is it that I get back? How can I play around with the stuff that I get back to produce the result that I want to send to the client? So I'm going to leave it to you as a curiosity exercise to go and do a search on, hey, can I sync async and await? And when you use async and await, you'll see that you don't have a way to catch the errors. So this is why you wrap them inside of a try catch. You do have sample code using try catch and async and await. But for the lectures, you're going to see me use promises instead, just to keep your own task. Make sense, Will? They both perform the same. You could get accomplished the same. It's just the different syntax to approach handling promises. What do you need to do today? Let's see. We have this challenge for today on Training Kit. And we're going to ask you that you install Connect, Next, SQLite 3, and you're going to deal with zoos instead. The good news is that you already have a database, and it's got a zoos table. You don't have to create it. And it's got an ID and a name. It looks like today. It's going to be unique for the name, and it's required too, so it's not null. And of course, the ID is going to be an integer that auto increments. So it's pretty similar to what we have, only that instead of being rows, it's going to be zoos. Your job is to implement the CRUD operations for it. And of course, if you feel like, oh, this was really fast, I can do this now. Even though we're not telling you to validate, we are telling you that the name is required. So probably you don't want to be hitting the database to get an error. You probably want to validate that in here on your routes, right? Again, there are things, and I told you in the beginning, we're not doing any validation when we're doing the post, but you probably want to validate here. So you probably want to do something like, hey, I'm going to extract away the name out of, oh, well, this is only one property here, so it's even simpler. So you probably wanted to say, hey, if rec, if I don't have a rec.body.name, we're not calling the database, right? We're going to return from here. We're going to say return, res.status, and maybe do a 400 and say that JSON. But this is things that I expect that you can do. You can write an if. You can check if a property is there, if it's got a value. And you know that, this is going to be an error that says you're giving me wrong data, so it's going to be a 400 this time. I'm going to say something like message that says, please provide a name for the role, right? Else, then you want to do all this stuff. But we're not hitting the database until we know that we have all the data that we need. We're being good citizens. Why? The database is going to be an expensive operator. You're going to be hitting a database over the network eventually. So just by adding this simple validation in here, you avoid making all of this and having the error coming back from the database. So now if I try to do a post, the database is not going to be bothered anymore. If I do a post without the name, I say names here, do a send, we got that 400 saying, hey, it's your fault, not mine. Before we had that check, we got a 500. We got an error coming back from the database. We said, look, we run into an error. In this case, we're telling the client, hey, your problem. This is your fault. It's a 400 error. Please provide a name. Okay? So even though we're not telling you in the instructions, you should validate because this is required. Same thing when you're doing the update. You should validate. So go all out and make this work nice. I'm not telling you to use, a router, but I am going to assume that you are going to use a router. You're going to organize your code in the right way. So again, less and less guidance as we go of a step-by-step instructions because you are a developer now. Okay? So read the README, please read the README. The READMEs are for to be read. So read the README and then add your extra touch of, I'm gonna make this a robust API. Make it maintainable. Make us proud. Last chance for questions. Good job today. Thank you for helping me troubleshoot those issues, and I'll see you on Slack.